Hello, this is Dr. Robert McMullen. I'm a psychiatrist in New York City, and I went to Georgetown Medical School and did my residency at Columbia, and have done mainly psychopharmacology for 40 years. And the last decade, I've also been using TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, which works even better. What I want to talk about is dysthymia, D-Y-S-T-H-Y-M-I-A. Dys means abnormal, and thymia means mood. And we use this word to mean mild depression or minor depression. And many people have this chronically. Sometimes it fluctuates, that people will be in a mild depression or dysthymic for months or years, and then occasionally go into a major depression for a while and then come out of it. Or some of them may come up to normal occasionally and go back and forth between being in a completely normal mood and being mildly depressed. And some have mild highs. There's all sorts of possible mood swings that humans can have. I want to talk about some behavioral things that can help out with dysthymia. But first I want to mention how it is right on the border of needing medication, and often does need medication. It's hard to say what is a disorder. How heavy do you have to be called overweight? If somebody's 5'10" and they weigh 300 pounds, everybody can agree that that's overweight. But then if they're 200 or they're 180, and I think the ideal weight is around 150 for somebody who's, for their health, is 5'10". But very few people can reach that weight as we get older. So there's not a sharp line. And it's the same way with depression, that somebody can feel fine, but then if circumstances change and they feel better, then maybe they weren't actually up to normal. A fellow named Kramer wrote a book about 1990, I believe, called Listening to Prozac. I never read the book, or I read part of it, but I know the plot. He was a psychoanalytic type, interested in psychotherapy twice a week with people. So when people had chronic depression, he and other people looked upon them as having some psychological problems. Their mother didn't treat them right or something. And they did psychotherapy and a lot of deep thinking and going over the past and trying to understand why they were unhappy in life. These were people that were functioning. They were not obviously dysfunctional. Then when Prozac came out, and he put a few people on it, they became normal in mood. They didn't want psychotherapy anymore. They felt fine. And he was astonished because it went against everything he believed in. And this is sort of the plot of finding this out, but it went against his beliefs, and he was going to have to reorder his beliefs, because these people who he had devoted much time and thought to in finding out what the causes of their depression were, these same people seemed to have a biological basis for why they were chronically depressed. And this was a revolution in psychiatry. With people with mild depression, we had a very hard time treating them prior to Prozac, because the medications often gave more side effects than the benefit. And Prozac and the other SSRIs seem to work better in these mild depressions in any case. Once people with mild depression began to improve, they were more likely to talk about it. And if they were a newspaper reporter, they would say to their boss, you know, there's a new antidepressant I'd like to write about, and it's pretty common that people have this depression. He didn't tell the boss that he had depression, but that's how the story got legs. Now, there's quite a few things I could say about why, how we are more depressed now than in the past, but I'm not sure we know all the reasons. E. Fuller Torrey wrote a very interesting book called The Invisible Plague, and he and a co-writer analyzed the data of all admissions to mental hospitals and prisons, the ones in the prisons who were psychiatrically disordered and the ones who were in the poorhouse because of psychiatric disorder. As the state hospitals became full, then these people would get sent to the poorhouse or the prison. And they counted all of these psychiatrically ill people in Wales, Ireland, England, the United States, and Eastern Canada. They did this because he felt that the people that were hospitalized back then with severe schizophrenia or severe depression or manic depression, that they were the same people that would get hospitalized now, at least before medicines now. Because you didn't want your uncle to go into a state mental hospital, you did everything to keep him out. And but finally, when he tried to burn the house down and he thought the neighbors were trying to kill him, you just had no choice. And you either put him in a state hospital, or if you had enough money, you would put him in a private hospital. But it was basically the same patients who ended up in hospitals then as now. And since 1800, there's been a steady decrease in the number until it's 20 times as many people in hospitals in 1950 than there was in 1800. And there's just a steady line going up in all of these countries I've mentioned. One difference is that Eastern Canada and the United States lagged behind about 40 years in this increase, but the same increase. His argument is that something has changed in society. He doesn't speculate what, whether it's something in the atmosphere or the way we're living or what we're exposed to, but this was a dramatic change. And in fact, the Massachusetts legislature would get very upset because after 5 years, they'd be coming back wanting more psychiatric hospitals. And they said, what is wrong? The population is not expanding as fast as your population. And we have roads to build, a few other things, and all this money is going to psychiatric hospitals. They thought the psychiatrists must be overdiagnosing these illnesses. But E. Fuller Torrey's point is people did not go into these hospitals for fun, and their relatives didn't put them there for nothing. These were really ill people. And there are anecdotal reports of older doctors in their 80s or 90s who would say, I just don't understand it. When I was young and started in practice, there was not all this mental illness. It just wasn't there. It's just an incredible change. When Bedlam was founded in England, the first psychiatric hospital was called the Bethlehem Hospital, Bedlam for short, and I would use the word Bedlam to mean something crazy and dysfunctional. There were not that many people there, and when someone took a trip to London, one of the places they would go to was Bedlam to look at the crazy people who were doing weird things and acting strange. So that was one of the things you would go see, like Big Ben. But sometime later, nobody ever thought of going there. And his argument is that early on, mental illness was so rare that you wanted to go see it. But after 50 years or so, there was enough mentally ill people walking around your village that you weren't curious about it anymore. Anyway, I don't know what has caused this change. It could be different viruses, it could be different bacteria in our intestinal tract, it could be our lower and lower levels of vitamin D, which you need for brain formation in fetuses. Who knows? But I will mention a few things with regard to hunter-gatherers. We are basically hunter-gatherers in our biological makeup. For 2 or 3 million years, we were upright primates who hunted and gathered food. And only 12,000 years ago did farming start in all parts of the world. It started around the same time. And prior to 10 or 12,000 years ago, everybody was a hunter-gatherer. The humans that were in Europe for 50 or 60,000 years lived in bands of 20 to 50 people and moved every few months as necessary to find a new area where you hadn't killed off the game, or find an area where the berries were in season, or whatever reasons. And these people have been studied a lot, and it is quite surprising how similar all these different hunter-gatherer groups are. One that's very well known is the Hajda. I think it's spelled Hajda in Kenya. And I read one book about them. And their characteristic of what hunter-gatherers were. By the way, some anthropologists have called them the first affluent society. Before farming, say 12,000 years ago, if you find skeletons of humans 100 years or 200 years earlier, they're bigger and more robust. They were healthier. When they got up in the morning, they went out and ate vegetables they could find, or grubs, or meat. They ate a wide variety of things, anything they could find. But once humans started farming, then their diet became mainly bread or mainly rice. So they had a much less varied diet and were not as healthy. Also, the average hunter-gatherer just works 4 hours a day. Maybe 3 hours, maybe 6 hours, but not an 8-hour day. The women go out with digging sticks, special hard long sticks that they use to dig in the earth to dig up the tubers of lianas. The liana vine has tubers deep in the earth where it stores energy. And they dig these up, and they sometimes hit at the dirt they can sense where it is. And this makes up 51% of the calories. These are something like eating carrots or something like that. So they're not something you relish having, but they're a major portion of their diet. And then the men spend a few hours a day out hunting, and they use poisoned arrows, so that increases their odds a lot. So several hundred years ago, when they didn't have poisoned arrows, there probably was significantly less game killed that was on the large size, like a zebra or an antelope or something, and they may have done more scavenging. from other animals. 3 of these Hajj women were out gathering roots, and they came across a leopard that had just killed a small antelope. And the 3 women went and chased the leopard off. They each had these sharp poles in front of them and went after him and scared him or her off. The leopard not knowing that he could have killed them if he just did it, but these were 3 big people with their eyes in front of them like predators, and you can scare them off. Anyway, now another thing that's very different about this society is there's quite a sense of equality. Everybody works together, everything is done together. You've known these people all your life, and many of them are close relatives. When you go hunting, you're going with them. When you're going out gathering other types of food or hunting, you're talking. It's just your whole life is with these other people. And food is divided equally. So if one man is a better hunter than usual, and every week or so he kills an antelope, when he brings it to the camp, it's shared equally with everybody. There are also no leaders. There's no chiefs. When they need to make a decision about moving to a different camp, maybe the more experienced older people will have a bigger say in this. They will discuss it, but eventually everybody in the camp will have to go along with it and accept it before they'll do it. So there's a lot less stress since you don't have a chief you have to worry about or kowtow to. If somebody becomes a little bossy and is trying to boss other people around and be like a minor leader, generally what happens is the people that don't like it will just leave, and they'll go start a separate band, or they'll go join another band of the same tribe, of the same language group. They exercise a lot. They 3 or 4 hours of getting food is mostly all exercise, and it is known and proven that if we get 1 hour of exercise 5 days a week, that works as well as Prozac. Exercise really helps depression. Their stressors are much lower. If they come across a black mambo or a green mambo, these very poisonous snakes, there's a lot of very poisonous snakes in Africa. It's very stressful. You see it, you freeze, you back away, whatever. Or a couple of lions roar on the other side of the trees. This causes a lot of anxiety. Your heart rate goes up, you're having a stress response. Now, this happens maybe once a week, every few days, something like this might happen. But with us, it happens every 5 minutes. If you're at work, if you're a lawyer at work, you got an opposing lawyer call on the phone, you got to pick it up, you got to talk with them, then you got to talk with another client. It's every few minutes we have a stressor hitting us. And this, in the long run, causes more heart attacks, more depression, no doubt. Omega-3s are a fat we need to make good brain cells with. Now we are very depleted in these because we have corn oil and everything, which is an omega-6. But in the past, we had an equal amount of omega-3s and omega-6s when we did not have corn oil and just ate regular wild meat and fish. And that can also be contributing to why we have a higher depression rate. Vitamin D may, I think it has some impact on depression, although there's not good studies on that. But it is a hormone that we've always made with the help of the sun. All this time that we were hunter-gatherers, we probably wore very little clothing. Before there was sheep or cotton, The choices people had for clothing was fur, which they used in the winter in Europe, or leather, or weave something out of plants. None of these sound too comfortable in the summer, so they probably wore little or nothing. And the hunter-gatherers that have persisted to the present time wear little or nothing. Maybe recently they are wearing some things influenced by the people who colonized in that area. And also, if you wear a white t-shirt, it's a little more comfortable to block the heat of the sun. But with the heat, with the ultraviolet light of the sun, we make vitamin D, which is a steroid hormone, which is necessary for growth. It's necessary for strong bones, infections. The reason we have flus and cold viruses in the winter is because the vitamin D is low in the population, and so more of these can spread. In areas in Central Africa and India and Southeast Asia where people still work outside all day and nobody works in offices, they have about 1/10 as many cancers as we do. 1/10 as much breast cancer, colon cancer, and so on. And as soon as a country industrializes, this has been noticed for a long time, the breast cancer rate goes up to almost the same as the United States in a short while. This is because the women are no longer working in rice fields, they're working in a factory all day long and are not exposed to the sun at all. Another interesting thing is GI diversity. We are healthier if we have more diverse bacteria in our gastrointestinal tract. There's billions of bacteria and viruses in our GI tract, and I don't know how many different varieties. It has been shown a number of ways that it is healthier to have more diversity. For example, someone noticed that the Mennonite children had a much higher rate of asthma than the Amish, though they are of the same genetic background and they live a very similar life. The Mennonites use modern tractors, and then they maybe have a paved road coming into the farmhouse, and then a clean barn where they put the tractors. Whereas the Amish live very differently. They have no machinery, and they do all their farming with horses, and they travel in buggies and so on. And therefore, the Amish have much more the bacterial diversity in their GI tract, because they've got manure around and dust and everything else. And this diversity seems to have helped their immune system not have a autoimmune aspect to it as is found in asthma. And there's other studies in other areas that indicate this diversity is high. Two of the bacteriologists that study this called the good bacteria old friends. And some of them are the different types of lactobacillus that are found in overripe fruit, which of course we ate a lot of. If we came across fruit, we'd eat a lot of that. And also, I forget the name of the bacteria that's found heavily in stagnant water. That was a very important bacteria. Another one is Helicobacter pylori. This one we've just about eliminated in North America because it causes stomach cancers. But it was also one that was very involved in helping our immune system along. There's been an interaction between bacteria and humans for millions of years, and this was apparently one of the major ones. This coronavirus problem recently actually points to the importance of GI diversity. People are worried now about washing your hands frequently in order to avoid catching a coronavirus. Well, this is true, one should. It turns out that about 10 times per day, a human will rub their nose or their mouth or their eyes. They'll do things like that. You can sit and count it. And they looked at some medical students and they touched themselves about 23 times an hour, but about 10 of those times were the mucous membranes of the eye, the nose, or the mouth. Now, if you've touched a doorknob where somebody with coronavirus touched it, and then later you rubbed yourself, you can have that virus. But why do humans do that? You know, they're saying this is a bad habit. Well, why? If everybody does it, there must be a reason. And it must have been to keep our GI diversity high. So if you're living out in the middle of nowhere, or somewhere back then, I guess, but you're not in a modern society and you're out hunting and at home you're doing things around the camp, just touching things and then rubbing, you'll pick up bacteria from the area and increase your diversity. One fellow was describing the Hajj after they killed an antelope, and so one of the fellows who had dismembered it, he was covered with blood. There was no soap or water around, so he opened up one of the stomachs of the antelope and took out this green mass of half digested food, and he used that to rub to clean the blood off his hands. Now he's getting a lot of GI diversity off of that, because then he rubs. Of course, he's going to rub later on. He's going to rub his face somewhere. He's going to get all the bacteria that's in that antelope's stomach. Then later on, they're cooking the food, and they cut up the intestine, the big intestine, in slices like sushi, and then throw it on the fire and singe it a little and burn it a little and then cook it. So they offered him one, but he turned it down. It wasn't completely cooked. This is intestine that has not been washed, and there's not any visible feces on it, but all the bacteria are right there inside the intestine, and it's not fully cooked, and then they eat it. So they're getting all of the the GI diversity that this antelope has in his GI tract.
What is the treatment for my depression?
Taking probiotics is a way of increasing GI diversity, and it has been proven to help depression. And there was a Norwegian doctor who gave probiotics to bipolar people after they'd had a mania, because she knew they would get a depression soon. And the ones who were given the probiotics, they had 50% less depressions if they were on this probiotic. Now the problem with probiotics is that half of what you buy over the counter, there's nothing alive in them. So it's better to get 5 or 6 different brands and put them all in a jar or in a bowl. And I put them in, they last better in the refrigerator. And then, take a couple a day, just pick out any. And the pharmacist has a probiotic in the refrigerator. Ask him or her which probiotic they have in their refrigerator, because if they're refrigerated right away, even if you order them on the internet, they're more likely to be alive and not have dried out. With hunter-gatherers, it is easy to understand why we crave steak and crave sweets. Normally, if you're gathering food, it's a lot of work to gather it. And then if you've got a bunch of tubers and things like that, you don't have to eat them right away. You can put them aside. Or if you're running low, you can always go get some more. It's just a lot of work. But if you come across a fig tree that's ripe, then that's easy food. There's no work, there's no digging, there's no looking around. I was in Australia, and an Aborigine woman showed me how to find a certain tuber. And you go around, and every 10 feet or so you could find one, and you could pull it up. And it was like a thin carrot. You'd have to pull up a lot of them to make a meal. That would be a lot of work. But you have a fig tree, you can just eat all you want. It's free calories. So as long as you have it, you should eat everything you can. If you go away and come back, some other animal or baboon will have eaten it. And so that's why the fruit makes these sweet things, is to give us easy calories, hoping we'll take the fruit and spread the seeds someplace else. The other thing that ends up being free calories, at least for the moment, is meat. So if you happen to kill a zebra and you bring his parts back to the camp, everybody's going to stay up all night eating, if not eat for 2 days, because the meat's going to go bad. And you may as well eat as much as you can while you have it before it goes bad. And so that's one of the reasons we crave steak and sweets. So once I get terminal cancer, I'm only going to eat steak and ice cream. That's my plan.
God forbid. What about TMS?
Oh yeah, and TMS, I don't know what that has to do with hunter-gatherers, but it...
Well, treating mild depression.
Huh?
For treating mild depression.
For treating minor depression, TMS is very good, because we've had many people who had lifelong depression, and then I can think of 2 sisters I treated that they had lifelong mild depression, functioned okay, depression was not a major problem, and then when they went into a severe depression and they had TMS, it brought them to normal, but it was normal for the first time in their life. In retrospect, they realized I've been mildly depressed all my life because I'm normal, and one of them went 3.5 years before relapsing. Came in, got 5 or 6 treatments, and then went another 3.5 years, then had a little relapse, and then the medicines were changed. But to go 7 years normal when never having been normal before is really astonishing. So a lot of people that are chronically mildly depressed would have the same benefit as somebody that's in a major depression, and maybe even more so because the illness is not as severe. Another good thing with the hunter-gatherers is that they don't worry that much. They have enough to eat and to live, and they are not worrying about the future because they've been doing this for years. They know where to find food, and you know, the food that's maybe less palatable, they can always find enough, and the others they kill enough, so they're not worried. They're not under as much stress and anxiety as we are. They don't seem to have as much.
So stress and anxiety can lead to depression?
Yeah, I think stress and anxiety definitely can make people more depressed, and It's hard to measure it and hard to measure the effect, but if you've seen somebody for years and then suddenly they get a very good job with a boss who really likes them and is good to them and warm to them, and they're finally making a very good income, their whole attitude and can change. Or if somebody is discouraged and downtrodden and feels a victim of life, and then they inherit from their aunt this surprising amount of money so they never have to work the rest of their life, some people, they change. They feel much better. You know, hopefully they're just gonna live off the dividends and interest, and they may mess things up, but sometimes they will be able to change their life and find valuable things to do and valuable ways to help out society and feel good, but now not under all this of this pressure and tension. And then I've seen other people who were doing well and then life set them back, work-wise and socially or something, and that constantly weighs on them and keeps them depressed. It's really hard to change all that, but if you can, by getting new interest, getting a new job, or getting an education, feeling like you're improving yourself, feeling like you're taking control of things, then that can make a huge amount of difference. And to try to think positively, think reframe things to think of them in a positive way. So if you get in trouble for drinking too much and you got a big fine and you can't drive your car for 3 months, you say, I'm going to make a change in my life because of this. I'm going to stop drinking completely, and I'm going to start exercising 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, and I'm going to make something good out of what happened. And so any bad thing that can happen, you can say, well, because of this, I'm going to do that. That's even better. And
I learned this week, last week I learned that you can only control your second thought. Your first thought coming from your heart, you cannot control it. You know what you're thinking. It's jumping to your mind and you think about something. Oh, I get a fine. Oh, I get...
Yeah.
But your second thought, you're supposed to control it.
Yeah.
Not the first one. The first one is jumping.
Yeah.
The second thought, you need to control it and to take care, like you said, to a better place.
Yeah. Another interesting thing is that sound is an antidepressant. I just learned this a while back. There's studies on this. I think they use neutral sound. But of course at home you'd have the TV on or the music on. Same intensity as human voice. This makes sense because humans never lived alone. In Grimm's fairy tales there's a witch or so that lives in a little house in the middle of the forest. But she's a witch. Nobody else lives like that. And nobody did. And when we lived in bands, people were in huts and large families there. And during the day, the kids are outside playing, making noise. Babies are crying. People are sitting around pounding things to make food or making arrowheads or something. And people are talking. Always there's sound. It was never silence. Unless you're hunting and you're walking in the forest or something. And it therefore makes sense that when you live in an apartment by yourself and you have no sound, that is a terrible place for a human to be. We're not designed to live alone and to have no sound. it's just deadly. So it's really important that you make friends, and I find it easier in small towns. I don't know if anybody's made much of a study of this, but I'm from a small town of 3,000 or 4,000 people originally, and even though I've been away for over 60 years, I can go back there and find people I know, or people who knew my relatives, and I'm immediately in contact with people, immediately accepted a little bit. And if you move to a town like that, you very quickly make friends, because if you run into somebody in the grocery store or the bank, you're going to run into them in a few days again. Whereas in New York, you run into somebody and then I never see them again. So you might stop and have a little talk to them, but you'll never run into them again. Such a big city. And in these small towns, people are just friendlier, and I think it's better for people with depression to be in a place like that. Now, if they still need medicine, they should have the medicine, but I think they're better off with both. It's also important to sleep a regular 8 hours and get up in the morning and to have something you feel good about, and that you are contributing to society. And in these groups, there was no division of labor, except maybe women tended to do more of one thing and men more of another, but they also would do, that would overlap. But there was no division in the labor, in the sense that some people are artisans and make artistic works, or some people make tools and some people don't, that everyone makes tools. Everyone is capable of doing what it is that has to be done. Now, there's some people that are better, so there's always a couple of men who are obviously better hunters than others, but they don't get any special privileges. The women are a little bit more interested in marrying that person, although they don't seem to get anything extra out of it. They don't get more calories, since everything is divided up. But maybe there's some status or just some natural inclination to marry somebody with the best genes. But it's this feeling of equality where everybody's working together, and you're just doing things together, and that's the way it is. Without any sense of we're a society different than others, or any thoughts of social class. It's really quite a different thing than what we are used to. It may be one of the reasons why people have such a powerful desire for democracy. It seems that in countries where it's really dangerous to be in favor of democracy, that there's always this strong desire for more equality. And perhaps that's because we've always, that's the way we were. But once we developed farming, then people would take over and be the landlord, and then say you have to pay rent, you have to pay, and that's one of the reasons that, for hundreds of, thousands of years, the average human was just getting by because they're paying the upper social classes money to live on. That's why they had the French Revolution. And it's only in the last 100 years or two that farmers have been more equal. And actually that was in the United States, because the Cajuns in Louisiana, I think they were pushed out of Newfoundland, and they were French settlers up there, and the British felt that they were perhaps going to be disloyal and be on the side of France, so they expelled them. And then they were scattered around the world. They were down in Maryland, they were in other places, and France offered to take them back, and they said absolutely not, because the France would take them back and they would just be peasants. So they would just be serfs again. Whereas in North America, they had their own farms. They were like any American farmer. They had their own farms. They were prosperous. They were independent. They weren't going to go back to France and be a peasant. And finally, Spain said, well, we'll let you have land in Louisiana. So they went down there and developed all these farms and rice fields in Louisiana. Although they used a lot of slaves to make these giant rice farms, and then after slavery ended, the white people have these giant farms, and the black people got nothing. I taught school down there, so I know all about it. Anyway, that's a little digression about depression and modern society and hunter-gatherers.
Thank you very much, Doctor.